Welcome back to The Breakdown with me, NLW. It's a daily podcast on macro, Bitcoin, and the big picture power shifts remaking our world. What's going on, guys? It is Friday, March 28th, and that means it's time for the Friday Five. Before we get into that, however, if you are enjoying The Breakdown, please go subscribe to it, give it a rating, give it a review, or if you want to dive deeper into the conversation, come join us on the Breakers Discord. You can find a link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/breakdownpod. All right, friends, we are back live. Scott Melker and I had our customary Friday Five conversation this morning. It's a really interesting one. I think we accidentally stumbled into some very pertinent topics, tokenization and value accrual, and why it's sneakily maybe the most important narrative, but not one that is obviously clear when it comes to the value proposition for people on Wall Street. We talk a little bit about the ongoing cleanup that's happening in Washington, nothing but positive signals there. Anyways, it's a good one. Lots of not hit you over the head, but still really important things happening this week. So without any further ado, let's dive in.
I'm here broadcasting live from Bill Barheit's living room. He's the guy who has always had the piano behind him. I'm going to go ahead and bring on NLW. Still broadcasting live from Bill Barheit's living room. It's weird. We should just have been on one camera, you know?
Yeah, the setup is actually complicated when you try to get two people in the same room. So I'm glad we figured it out.
It is. I hope you're not getting echo through your mic from me screaming 3 feet away. But here we are, not for a piano concert, but to talk about the Friday Five, all the things that have happened in crypto this week. I mean, we just sort of have to always honorable mention price action, which continues to be about as pleasant as a long trip to the dentist. Stories are hilarious. You got spot ETFs report 10th straight day of net inflows. Yeah, it's great news. And then, the next article is we have options expiring, Bitcoin above 90K. And then crypto slumps 4% on Trump tariff moves. But US GDP data helps markets recover. I mean, I've come to the grand conclusion that nobody knows what the hell is going on or where Bitcoin price is going or why it is the price that it is at any given time.
Well, yeah, and then like 5 minutes ago, didn't we get a hotter than expected CPI print too? So what's going on with that? I mean, that's gonna be coming in at.
I don't even know if that's good or bad.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, one thing's good news. It's good news for the economy. It's bad news for market. If it's bad news for the economy, we might raise rates, and that's therefore good news for risk assets. So here we are, just in the doldrums of sideways miserable chop.
Yeah, man, we are always reminded that people in crypto hate nothing more than sideways. Like we are gluttons for punishment or excitement, but one way or another, we would rather be either cratering or soaring and nothing in between.
Well, this nothing in between is a purgatory that many cannot tolerate, as you can see by people losing their minds, obviously, on Twitter. But let's talk about the first official story of the day, and that is, of course, assuming I can get it up here, GameStop sinks on plan to borrow $1.3 billion to buy Bitcoin. You've got this tweet here. There's what the chart looks like after they decided to issue debt and made that announcement, down 25% at one point. This is a pretty funny little meme we got going on here. But what's interesting here is that I was kind of traveling yesterday. So the day before, I saw that GameStop was up like 14% pre-market, because they announced the strategy to buy Bitcoin. But then when they said they were going full micro strategy, you've seen the movie Tropical Thunder, right? Never go full.
Yeah.
I had to quote that here. But even in 2025, never go full anything. But they went full micro strategy, raised a convertible note, and down goes the ship.
It's very weird. You're correct in the analysis. They announced that they were going to do this, and they were sitting on this big old cash pile from cashing out at one of the recent pumps about a year ago, or, I guess a little less than a year ago. And I think that the market liked the idea of them spending some of that cash on Bitcoin, right? And so, stock rallied. It was up double digits, but then they decided to issue convertible debt to do it, and everyone is sort of left with the confused monkey meme of why do that rather than just spend the cash on hand. But look, ultimately, I think that GameStop is not a company that does things sort of halfway. They lean into their own memes, and it's it seems like that's what they're thinking about doing here. I think that this is just the the poetry of this. This is the prophecy being foretold. I mean, this was, we had that quote from Elon forever ago. That in retrospect, it was inevitable. This feels like that, times 50. So I don't know. I think it's a match made wherever matches are made these days. But I think that markets are a little confused around the specifics of they thought it was one thing and they liked it, and then when it was a different thing, they didn't like it.
There's a lot of conjecture about this, obviously, because of the photo of the CEO of GameStop with Michael Saylor a few weeks ago. And so, as you said, the prophecy did come true. I guess it begs the question whether GameStop is a serious enough company for us to actually even count this as meaningful, or do we need a company that actually does something that's not a meme to adopt Bitcoin for us to start really talking about it as a serious treasury asset? I mean, I think in the eyes of Wall Street, even strategy at this point is a bit of a meme, right? It's obviously not the business software company that's successful in just adding Bitcoin to its balance sheet. This is their entire strategy. If GameStop follows the same, do you want to really be the second doing it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think GameStop has a bigger business than MicroStrategy did when it got this thing started, right? Still $5 billion a year or whatever in revenue. And the other thing to note is they also did report like 4x what Wall Street expected in terms of revenue or profit rather. So there were other reasons besides just the Bitcoin announcement that their stock might have been going up. But I think that it's pretty clear that this is still in the realm of the meme side of the treasury strategy. There was an interesting recent argument recently. I can't remember if it was Matt Hogan or if I'm just attributing all interesting analysis to him right now. But someone was arguing that the main impact of the BSR was less likely to be other governments immediately kind of, getting in the game and the game theory happening that way. And instead it being removing another kind of lingering impediment when it came to the treasury strategy, right? Like legitimating Bitcoin as a treasury asset that was likely to be taken up by, public companies faster than it was by government. So, look, I think that we're likely to see more of this. I don't think that MicroStrategy is, I think that they've made it so that you can't really completely copy their approach, right? That's sort of, they've on the one hand evangelized, but on the other hand blocked off barriers because there's just not that much room for multiple of these types of companies. So, it'll be interesting to see. I think GameStop is a little archipelago ecosystem unto itself, and ultimately what it's going to care about is what makes sense to it and what makes sense to its legion of still kind of committed shareholders. The GameStop folks might not be as loud as they used to be, but they have not gone away. They are.
Oh, we saw that when Roaring Kitty came back.
Absolutely. It, of all stocks, has the most crypto-like following. Like there is a floor put by the people who just like the stock, and I don't think they're going anywhere. Hello, friends. I am thrilled to share that Ledger is once again partnering and sponsoring with The Breakdown. Many of you know, but for those of you who don't, Ledger is the most secure hardware wallet for your crypto and logins. It's trusted by 7 million users and secures 20% of the world's digital assets. What's more, Ledger is a lot more than wallets. Over the recent years, they've built a comprehensive ecosystem of products and services, all of which are designed to make digital ownership more secure and accessible. You can buy your Bitcoin with Ledger and Ledger Live, and so much more. Basically, not only do they want to keep your assets secure, they want you to be able to do more with them. Ledger's newest devices, the Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, introduced the world's first secure touchscreens, making it easier and safer to manage your transactions and assets. Alongside Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, the company also launched the Ledger Security Key app, offering a safer alternative to traditional passwords and enhancing your digital security. If you are in this space, you owe it to yourself to at least check out Ledger and their ecosystem, what they have available to you. So thanks once again to Ledger for sponsoring the show.
There are people in the comments who don't like us being in the same room, so I'm going to go ahead and move myself to the Doge with glasses from ChatGPT just for the moment. And we're going to move on to the next story, which is a lot more serious, actually, than my background would indicate, although I think this is one of the best headlines I've seen in a long time. Crypto's favorite money laundry shakes the yoke of sanctions. This, of course, is about Tornado Cash being removed from the OFAC sanctions list. Absolutely huge news. You can see that it's been delisted. This was something that was very important to the crypto industry and is actually happening. It turns out that code might be free speech here, or that you might not be a criminal for simply protecting your privacy. So what's going on here? And are these guys still sitting in jail, even though the OFAC has removed this from the sanctions list?
Yeah, so it's great news, but not as sort of unreservedly great news as perhaps it might seem at first. So the great news is exactly what it said, that all of these addresses that had been previously listed on the sanctions list are now off, and that Treasury is acknowledging this challenge of sort of, how do we deal with the fact that we don't want North Korea, using these assets while at the same time we don't want to penalize, and kind of, abnegate our own principles in order to get there. What makes it a little bit less fully robust in terms of the counter shift is the Treasury is not arguing or guaranteeing that they're never going to put anything with Tornado Cash or a mixer back on the sanctions list, right? This is a very specific change that's happened in the context of these particular addresses that had been listed. It's not totally clear how far Treasury's conviction around this goes. It feels very much like they're in a uncomfortable kind of in-between place. They are dealing with a court order, right? So there's some amount of this that was compelled, and they're just trying to get ahead of it rather than fully having to be compelled. We have other parts of the government, the SDNY, that are still pursuing criminal charges around this. So it is still an uncomfortable area. I mean, it basically, it does appear that you're less likely now to be jailed as an American for just using these types of tools, but we're not out of the woods when it comes to real clear legal precedent for mixers and for this type of technology. So absolutely, undeniably progress, undeniably a good thing. But unfortunately, even more than some of the other good news that we've had recently, still has a lot of caveats and asterisks around where it all ends up ultimately.
Yeah, we won the battle, but far from saying we have won this war yet.
Yeah, it's a W. There may still be L's in our future.
Look at the market, man. I think everybody's feeling the L's at past, present, and future. But one thing that likely will not be an L is stablecoin legislation. It seems like the lowest hanging fruit, the most likely thing we're actually going to see. This is the U.S. House stablecoin bill going live and a flurry of crypto activity on Capitol Hill, of course, following the Genius Act from Haggerty in the Senate last week. And we know that there's multiple potential legislative efforts around stablecoins coming from both houses. Seems like there's a lot of consensus that something's going to get done. We just have to hope that that something is actually the kind of stablecoin legislation that we're looking for. But this is pushing forward.
Yeah, no, there is a huge amount of intent from both parties to get stablecoin legislation done. I think there's also a huge amount of intent to get market structure legislation after that done. There's just sort of more, inherently more complication there. One interesting thing about stablecoin legislation this week, and I don't want to read too much into it, but Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was at the DC Blockchain Summit, and she was basically, a big part of her comments were effectively like thinking oppositionally and antagonistically about what could happen depending on different ways of coming at the stablecoin legislation. And keep in mind, Gillibrand was a Democrat for common sense crypto regulation before other Democrats were. Yeah,
New York's Democrat.
Exactly. She crossed the lines to collaborate with Senator Cynthia Lummis on their comprehensive crypto legislation when that was a very unpopular thing to do. So I think that you can very clearly count Senator Gillibrand on the list of allies. But there were a lot of her points that were being made that felt very like banking lobby sort of, talking points, right? She was basically saying that, we probably shouldn't have interest yield-bearing stable coins because that'd undermine local deposits in local banks, and you couldn't have mortgages with that. Like just these things that are very, you've heard every time a new financial instrument that competes with people just putting their money in a bank comes up, it's this sort of argument. And what I couldn't quite tell, not being in the room, was how much she was saying, these are my concerns, versus saying, we're on the 1 yard line and now is the right time to think about everything that could be and really like nail this. It was clear that she was saying, you as an industry don't want to screw this up. It's really important. And if we have more screw ups, it's going to be a death knell for us. From afar, I took that sincerely as her actually saying, we don't want to screw this up. but it was still interesting to see at this late stage those sort of older, tired arguments re-enter the conversation. So I'm a little worried that we have kind of an 11th hour surprise coming in terms of some of the specifics of stablecoin legislation. But, we're in a better position to have those debates now than we were at any previous point in the past. So I'm sure we'll figure it out.
A lot of what you just said echoes, as a side note, some personal experience I'm having. I'm out of town with 13 of my friends from college. So you're talking about basically 13 guys who are almost 50, most of them Wharton graduates who are in some way, on Wall Street or were on Wall Street. And we got, of course, into the inevitable crypto conversation yesterday. And I can tell you that the sentiment from all of them is Bitcoin has been legitimized, but all they see in the media or think is that the rest of it is an unregulated, speculative casino that's gone off the rails. And I think that, her view kind of echoes not what we think when we look at the utility and the true use cases in this. Obviously, I'm trying to set them straight. But it feels like we have Bitcoin, and then even the legislation that we're looking for and other things might go the wrong way because of a view that this industry isn't serious.
Yeah, I mean, we're not necessarily making that a lot easier on ourselves at this stage. I will say that it's been interesting. It felt to me like when the Ethereum spot ETFs got approved, that Wall Street might comfortably settle into this sort of notion that with Bitcoin, they had exposure to the digital gold narrative, and with Ethereum, they had exposure to everything else, right? All the smart contract stuff. And it seems so far that Wall Street just doesn't care about exposure to the non-digital gold narrative at the moment. And I think that what the experience that you just recounted is sort of reflective of that.
Yeah, I don't think the news that BlackRock is tokenizing assets on Ethereum even hits their radar.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's important to us. We say, look, all these things are happening outside of Bitcoin, but that's an in 1 year, out the other story, because either they don't care or they just don't even understand enough to want to pay attention to that. So maybe that's a narrative that we're still early, right? But I still have my doubts that when a, Doge or Trump or anything else ETF drops, there's going to be much institutional interest in those things right now.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we were talking about this before, we are uncomfortably farther set back than we'd like based on the shenanigans of 2022. The institutions have been willing to move on as a whole and not really care that much because there's money to be made, and they were structurally denied playing in this playground for a while. But when it comes to individuals, most of their attitudes are still sour, It's going to take more time.
Important to remember that our president launched not one but two meme coins days before he was inaugurated, and then the Bybit hack was very much on people's radars. I think that's been understated, but I can tell you they all said, well, we see a lot of good news about Bitcoin, but then a lot of hacks and scams and meme coins. That's what they said. Yeah. So it gives me a good window into the problems we need to solve, at least from a narrative perspective. Some more good news here, though. OCC ceases examinations for reputation risk. And then to follow that, US FDIC moves to put an end to reputational risk following criticism from crypto industry. This is another banking and Operation Choke Point 2.0 story. Choke Point 2.0, what do you make of the reputational risk story? What does this mean?
This one is basically unmitigatedly positive. The whole reputational risk idea was sort of a circular argument that you could use to as a bully cudgel to get people to do whatever it is that you didn't want, right? You say the thing that you don't like creates reputational risk, which means that people can't do it because there would be more reputational risk. So it's basically an act of self-fulfilling prophecy to say, in our case, crypto is reputational risk. In previous administrations, it was, pornography or guns or whatever it was, right? So basically you say, if you do any of these things, there's reputational risk. So don't do those things. And people say, well, I'm not going to deal with that. What we saw with Operation Choke Point is that banks are creatures of opportunity, and it doesn't take much for them to say, screw that, I'm not going to deal with that particular set of things. No one's going to stand on principle on these issues. So this is the huge upgrades to just kind of get this out of the window. Also for beyond crypto, right? This is something that we have literally seen it deployed for other purposes other than targeting the crypto industry as a way to kind of, to delegitimize a legitimate or at least legal industry. And so very, very positive overall. Kind of leaves the Fed being the hanging chat of bank regulators when it comes to unwind of Operation Choke Point 2.0.
I can just tell you that from talking to my friends, I'm still suffering from reputational risk as a result of crypto. So maybe it's good that the government's not doing it, but I would have thought that here in 2025, it would have improved. But this is, to your point, very important even outside of our echo chamber, which is the only way that we focus. This is just common sense that this needs to be removed from the banking regulators toolbox. And I think that, as you said, we can cheer this as an unmitigated success. Another story here. Abu Dhabi's financial free zone signs MOU with Chainlink for tokenization framework. That's a memorandum of understanding for those who don't know. I recently interviewed Sergey from Chainlink, and he had me exceptionally bullish on the future of tokenization. And it seems that this is really starting to bubble. Whether the Wall Street guys understand it or not, this is yet another case where we do see real utility and the importance of this industries on the forefront with a major country.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about tokenization is that if you remember way back in the hinterland days when we were still dealing with Operation Choke Point 2.0 and we were wondering what the next, what the narrative, the positive narrative of the next cycle would be. This is also like sort of before Bitcoin spot ETFs. Real world asset tokenization was the odds on favorite for that, right? It was the thing that everyone was talking about as the likely next big narrative. Now, the challenge with tokenization as a narrative has always been that it is not obvious or intuitive to people that simply tokenizing other types of assets on a chain actually increases the value, that the value accrues to the token of that chain. There's a bunch of leaps that you have to get to in terms of understanding how these systems work to get there, right? Otherwise, you're just going to, well, it's just infrastructure. Like, I don't care about Swift. Why do I care about, you know what I mean? Whereas digital gold is very clear. It is a one-to-one proxy for a thing that has value, right? The token itself is the thing that is valuable versus the technology system that underpins it. So even if tokenization is a huge thing, I think it still doesn't necessarily a priori answer the narrative questions that come with it. And in fact, I think that there are a lot of folks on Wall Street who are 100% absolutely convinced and sold that, of course, everything is going to be tokenized on chain because it just the opportunities that it creates for new types of instruments and new types of derivatives and new modalities of trading. Like, that's a sandbox that every Wall Street person is going to want to play in. Like, obviously, we're headed that way. Certainly, it's kind of Larry Fink's attitude with this, like, to him, it is so clear that it's 100% inevitable. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's clarity around how that creates value for the chains underneath. But this is this sort of world moving forward, right? This is it's Abu Dhabi continuing to try to aggressively place itself as a key hub for this sort of new crypto economy. So again, really positive thing that I think it wouldn't surprise me if in 6 to 12 months we look back and say, hey, there was an interesting tokenization story happening quietly that whole time, but we were so focused on the spot ETFs and the meme coins and Trump and all these sort of things that we didn't see this sort of seismic infrastructure shift that was actually in its early innings then.
I agree with that take, that the adoption of the technology for this purpose is superior and therefore inevitable, but that doesn't mean that for your average person, it's going to be investable in a way that they're used to in crypto with some sort of guaranteed profit, right? I think it's going to be spread out exceptionally far. Sergey's point when I talked to him was that he thought crypto adoption on its own maybe has another 2-3x in people who are going to come here and speculate and play in this sandbox. But that bringing tokenization is a 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000x to what can be done with the technology coming in from the other side. Because once you tokenize things and people realize how powerful it is and that it's a superior way to transact and to exchange value, every asset will end up on the chain. But that doesn't really mean that a bunch of crypto natives are going to profit from it.
Well, and I mean, this is the interesting thing. Like, if Wall Street gets there, it's like the value proposition is no longer about the speculation. It's about gas fees and, whatever, like the ways that these chains actually are economically designed to make money from that activity. And so the funny thing is that it actually gets it right back in the realm of something that Wall Street can understand. It's just that so far crypto has been so tied to like what is the actual value of the token itself, the end unit token, not as a productive asset, but just as the thing, right? I mean, we've spent years arguing, at least I have that the sort of the pet rock version of Bitcoin is like its point is to be a pet rock. That's fine. If you're looking at it as digital gold, it's allowed to be that. That's not a dismissive thing. That is, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's holding your
Right.
holding your value, and I think that but there's always been this bifurcation between, is the token the thing or is the underlying technology the thing? And ultimately, I think it actually is a better financial story if Sergey's right, and we have 1,000 times the activity because that the business model is implicit and it just actually makes money and it actually is valuable in those ways, versus it just being, people betting on that being the inevitable future, and so kind of trying to price it in now and speculate early.
Well, pet rocks, actual ones, have held their value better than most of the things not named Bitcoin in my portfolio. So maybe I should start investing in those once again. We had a few honorable mentions here as we sort of come to the end. Of course, the US SEC holds crypto task force roundtable as Trump plans regulatory revamp. And even to further that story, you can see the schedule here, but there's 4 more of them through May that are already being planned and hosted. So very clear once again that the SEC, and maybe that's a proxy for the entire administration and legislators and regulators, are looking at this industry seriously and actually talking to experts and leaders in the industry for feedback on how to move forward. Just really encouraging. And once again, one of those zoom out and remember where we were at 18 months ago situations.
Oh my God. If you look at Hester Peirce's speech from the blockchain summit this week, it is like 2,000 words of, every single sentence is another to-do list item of how they make it work better in the future and how they deal with regulatory overlap. I mean, it's boring in a lot of ways because it's not big bombastic speeches about how they have to change and things like that. It is just like, all right, so how are we going to deal with the CFTC and the SEC having similar jurisdictional issues here, like point 1, point 2, point 3. No more time to explain that because I got 50 other things. Like, and if you actually take a step back, it is so action oriented, and I think you see that in the roundtables too. The roundtables, unlike perhaps White House summits about crypto, are there was like a detailed agenda with very specific stuff, and I think that if you're looking for the actual sort of like positive actions, that's where you should look.
100% agree. And while we're talking about legislation and regulation, we've got Rep. Emmer and Soto reintroducing Securities Clarity Act as Congress eyes crypto legislation. So important to remember that stablecoins may be the low-hanging fruit, but this is somewhat a precursor to market structure, which I think could be even bigger when it comes finally defining what these assets are, what baskets we can put them in, and how companies can move forward in that context. So nice to see that we're moving forward basically in every arena.
Yeah. I mean, and this one is the most valuable thing to have as its own focus as well, because if we could get nothing else done, but we could for once and for all get clear on securities designation and figure out actually how to allow for securities like behavior in some cases with clear, guardrails. This is the lingering question, has been forever. It's the number one thing. And any market structure legislation that doesn't deal with this will be incomplete. And so, I think Emmer and Soto are doing two things simultaneously. One, they're trying to shape that part of the conversation, which is so important. They don't want to wait. They want to get it going right now and want to actually try to like have their vision of that. They want to plant their flag. But two, they're also hedging. If you can't get the whole market structure thing done, you got this thing that you can fall back on, and it wouldn't be a bad consolation prize to at least get that through.
I agree. And the final honorable mention story here: Ripple to get $75 million of court ordered fined back from SEC drops cross appeal. This was one of those interesting scenarios where we saw the SEC continually dropping every single case or decide not to pursue them, including, I believe, crypto.com just in the last couple of days. And here we had Ripple kind of negotiating behind the scenes for a better deal when they saw the way that the winds were blowing. And looks like that's exactly what happened here. This is dead and they got some money back.
Throw a big party, guys. We're waiting for our invites.
Yeah, seriously. Well, apparently that was the White House crypto summit and didn't look like a very fun party to me. Guys, that's all we've got for you today. NLW are going to go, and I are going to go have a dueling piano concert in the back. It's going to be amazing, but we're not going to broadcast it for you. I'm sorry. Give NLW a follow on X and check out the breakdown. That's all we've got for you today, man. Thanks, and see you next week.
Later, guys.